Morning. It's a regularly scheduled meeting, Board of Fire Commissioners. The date is Tuesday, September 1. Time is 9:05.
Let the record reflect Commissioners Ibarra, Glazier, Fazio, Hara, and Woods Gray are present, and we have a quorum. Madam President?
Thank you. Flag salute, moment of silence.
Right hand over your heart. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing and join me in a moment of silence in honor of past and present members of the Los Angeles Fire Department who devote their lives to the protection of our community. Thank you.
So first item is Commissioner comments.
I had a great visit with the cadet post 89 out in the valley, and I was there with Chief Rideout and Captain Wu and a couple of our other of the folks who are really dedicated to making sure that the program there functions well. And I met some of our cadets and watched them do some of their evolutions. It was great to see the program. I walked away feeling inspired and also really a believer that this cadet program has a ton of untapped potential. And I'm really looking forward to working with this group and the department to really get it the resources it needs to really tap into all the potential that's there. I also had a dinner with Fire Station 39s. They hosted me. I had a nice time with them, and saw the site of the new fire station one day. And so, I think that's going to be a great site whenever we get through all the stuff that we got to get through to dot our I's and cross our T's. And then lastly, enjoyed the graduation down in Pedro at Drill Tower 40s. Great class there. I was excited to see new folks coming on, and it's a lot cooler in the harbor.
I was in Maui for 2 weeks, so I was thinking about you. Maui Fire Department says hi to the LA City Fire Department. Good group out there as well. Nothing to report in so far as it visits, though, but I was thinking about you. It was about 85 there. It was about 100 and something here, so it's a better place to be those 2 weeks.
You want to go? Go ahead.
So I attended the Women's Equality Day at the Getty House with the mayor and the first lady, and Chief Terrazas were there with all of our female gender firefighters, and it was really great. And then I was with Commissioner Woods Gray at the opening of the Costanza Park. I guess it's technically called Fire Station 88 Park.
That's what I think.
And maybe she can, expand upon that.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I thought that graduation this past time was one of the most outstanding graduations that we've had, and my hats are off to all the people who had parts in the program, because it was an outstanding program. I've been to two others, but this one was really very good, I thought. And not only was the demonstrations of fire skills wonderful, but we had a singing firefighter. Oh, and he was magnificent. Did you miss that? You did. Oh, you have to hear him again. What is it? No, it's a recruit. A new firefighter. Yes. And so that was really, it was a beautiful, beautiful ceremony, I thought. And talking with some of the families, we had firefighters whose grandparents had been firefighters who are deceased now with LAFD. We have people from everywhere, and we have women. That was the most important thing of the class, I guess. We had two women who we had watched, and we're trying to use our technology. Let's see if we can swip. Oh, good. We're going to show you the park. This is the new park Fire Station 84 park. It was quite charming, and Commissioner Hara and I really did enjoy our visit there with the neighborhoods and the children. The children seemed to really enjoy it, and there were children there who said, yes, we want to be firefighters. And I thought, well, this is really a good way to inspire them by having this large, and it's not a small piece of apparatus, it's really large, and it's beautiful and shiny, too, right now. We hope it stays that way. And then in the park, they placed 2 plaques, one from the city and one from the firefighters, which I forgot to include in the slideshow here. But that was very nice, and we thank Local 112 for helping with that park, because they provided food, hot dogs and whatever. It was really, I think everybody enjoyed that as much as anything else. But they also provided a very nice plaque on a stone that's really very nice in the park, which was really good. And I did attend the Women's Equity event, reception, I guess it was. And there was talk about the fire department, a lot of talk about the fire department, and new programs that are coming up that will hopefully help to increase the diversity within the fire department, which was good. The new deputy mayor was on the program, so that was good to see him there. I would like to thank you very much. I appreciate you showing the park. I would like to I have a recommendation or concern. I would like to have items on the agenda that have to go to the mayor and city council, not be on the consent calendar, because then there's no room for discussion so that everyone can understand what's really going on. And today I'd like to pull item E from that agenda.
Just so you understand how we do this, usually if there are items that when I first got on the commission, I would try to take things off the agenda all the time, because even though they're routine to the department, they're not routine to the commissioners. They were new to us.
Right.
At this point, after 2 years, if I've seen these items before and I kind of know what they are, usually they're contracts and they're pretty routine contracts, I leave them on the consent agenda, because they're items that, like we saw most of these reports, previous versions of them. But you're always welcome to take anything off the consent agenda for discussion. And in the future, because everything that's a contract needs to go to the mayor and city council.
I understand.
Okay. So we'll just take 4E.
I want
of the
to
consent
pull E.
agenda. Okay.
There was some current concerns about the Local 112. That's not on the consent calendar section, is
Which one?
something? I've lost my.
Oh, it's related to inspections. It's not on consent.
It's not on the consent.
No.
Good. Okay. Thanks. Thank you.
Okay. So that's commissioner comments. Item 2 is report to the fire chief.
Thank you, Madam President. As has been mentioned previously, on August 20th, we had the Harbor Recruit Training Academy graduation. It was a great show. I always wonder how we're going to top it next time, but we seem to always do it. That's a tribute to the men and women out there in recruit training under Chief Rideout's direction. Our next graduation will be Drill Tower 81 on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. Currently, there's 61 recruits out there, so we're hoping that they all make it. August 22nd, I attended the Operation South Bureau Public Safety Fair at Fire Station 65. That was put on by Chief Palacios and his staff in partnership with CD15 council member Bruce Galleno. And we had Don Green, who is a station commander 65s, who really does a great job with community relations. So that was a very good event. August 26th, I also attended the Women's Equality Day celebration at the Getty House. I was there with Commissioners Woods Gray and Hara and Chiefs Alicia Welch and Nikki Bordawi and Christian Crowley. At that event, we previewed our recruitment PSA featuring Mackenzie Vandergest. as a female firefighter. So that's going to be a focal point in our new campaign that we're looking to launch early next year. August 29th was the memorial service for firefighter pilot Steve Robinson out at Westlake Village. Very well attended. We had partnership with LA County Fire Department, Ventura County Fire Department. It was very emotional, as you can imagine, for the family. But we made the family proud and showed our appreciation for what Steve contributed to our department for his 29 years of service. And lastly, last week, Chief Vidovich was on the East Coast, and he picked up this Innovation Award for our involvement with Brycer. Brycer is the vendor that we've been using for the past 7 months to help catch up with our Reg 4 compliance. So we started at 37% complete. Now we're at 66%. And we anticipate meeting our goal, which was to be 90% compliance within 18 months. And that's a good thing for a lot of reasons. One of the most significant reasons is that in the past, that has resulted in a 10% reduction in false alarms. So there's a collateral benefit. We are the largest city to have partnered with Brycer. Chicago followed our footsteps, and locally, Long Beach is also using the same vendor. That concludes my report.
So moving on to the report by the Department on Significant Incidents from August 19th through September 1st.
Good morning, Madam Commissioner, Chief Terrazas, Commission, Madam City Attorney, and Ms. Gonzalez. My name is Philip Fliegel. I'm the Deputy Chief in charge of Operations Central Bureau. We have one incident to speak of that happened a couple weeks ago. The date was August 20th, about 10 o'clock in the evening. LAFD companies responded to a reported explosion at 811 Wilshire Boulevard, approximately 10:17 hours in the evening. LAFD units first got on scene and initially found a 22-story modern high-rise building with significant amount of smoke showing from the basement area or from the bottom floor. The incident commanders initially went into immediate LAFD high-rise incident command system procedures and did an investigation / fire attack and found there wasn't really a fire, but they investigated it was down on the sub-2 level where there was an industrial power explosion, possibly from the power that was supplying the building. There wasn't really any fire, so after that happened, they initially wanted to make sure the building was safe and clear. They investigated the building. Unfortunately for us, there wasn't a lot of people inside. It was late at night, and they only found 4 people initially that possibly had some injuries. They were the 2 of them were treated and released to the scene, and 2 of them were transported with minor injuries to the hospital. Once firefighters did their investigation really further, they knew that it was something more than just a basic fire type of thing, and DWP was summoned to kind of do an investigation with that. Simultaneously, they also searched the building and found there was nobody else inside the building and cleared the building. Once we figured out there was some type of electrical problem that would happen between possibly the DWP and the building, we had a meeting at the command post and decided that we want to make sure we had everything covered that needed to be handled at the incident. So DWP, LA Fire, and the building owner all got together and made certain objectives to make sure that the incident was going to be taken care of. Subsequently, the DWP said they were going to take everything online around the rest of the area and keep that one building isolated by itself. They would have all the rest of the buildings back online by the next morning. Unfortunately, that wasn't able to happen, so the next morning, LAFD sprung into action again, and thanks to the Fire Prevention Bureau and a lot of the people, inspectors, they figured out that there are 12 other high-rises within the area that needed to have some special care put to it because now all their fire protection and life safety systems were offline. People were coming to work on a Friday morning and they weren't able to go to the building because there was no power in it. So again, the inspectors were able to go ahead and have the building managers and representatives have a fire watch on there so the people were protected inside. And they also made accommodations to have the emergency generators that all high-rise buildings have. We're giving special regulation Division 5 permits to have fuel delivered to the generators so that the fuel could power the generators to keep those buildings online because they temporarily had no power. Within 2 days, all the buildings within the area, there was 12 other buildings, were able to get the power restored back to them. and their fire life safety systems were also replaced back into service. As of right now, I just got an update from Chief Vidovich about as far as some of the things happening with that building at 811 Wilshire, and still not able to be occupied yet. There's significant damage to the elevator shaft, so they can't put people inside the building to go up and down the elevators, and their fire life safety systems, including their fire pumps, need to be checked out and tested again. So I think one of the big take-backs we got from this incident was that even though there wasn't a significant fire incident, we helped in the resiliency are actually getting the other buildings back online, assisting the rest of the building patrons around the area to get back to their job and doing what they had to do that Friday and the subsequent days afterwards. So, again, the fire prevention inspectors and the Bureau did a great job of going over there and helping out with that. And that's that. Any questions about that incident? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a report from the medical director on significant medical emergencies from the same time period?
Good morning, Mark Eckstein, Medical Director. Significant incident since the last Fire Commission meeting. On August 19th, there was a head-on collision in 94's First Inn, resulting in physical rescue, 4 critical patients, 1 minor, 5 transports. On the 21st, there was a physical rescue in Fire Station 25's First Inn on the interchange of the 60 and 5 freeways, 5-car TA, 6 patients, including 1 DOA. There was also a head-on collision last Saturday on the 405 and 39's First Inn. Very tragically, a family in a minivan was struck high speed by a truck, resulting in the death of the father and an infant child. A very tragic incident. We also saw a rather significant spike in shootings since the last Fire Commission meeting. The LAFD responded to 43 patients with gunshot wounds, most of which were concentrated in Battalion 13. And perhaps due to weather, we've been extremely busy, and we had a total of 1,541 incidents yesterday. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Moving on to presentations.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Daniel Curry. I'm the Public Information Officer for the Los Angeles Fire Department. This morning we wish to acknowledge not one, but 2 incidents that are worthy of recognition. There isn't very much in common between these 2 events. One was an on-duty EMS incident, and the other was an off-duty rescue at a lake. But one common thread is one LAFD member who was in the right place at the right time both times. Firefighter-paramedic Daniel Apodaca is assigned to Fire Station 20, but on the date of our first story, he was working on Rescue 15 with firefighter-paramedic Ryan Sanders, who unfortunately couldn't be here today. In a somewhat routine incident on December 11th, 2014, at 09:47 hours, Rescue 15 and Engine 10 responded to 3460 South Broadway Street for Noelle Schweitzer, who was complaining of severe chest pain. On scene just 3 minutes later, the 2 paramedics began following standing field treatment protocols. In their 20 minutes on scene, firefighter paramedics Apodaca and Sanders administered doses of aspirin and nitroglycerin, ran several 12-lead EKGs, and started an IV. Despite her complaints, Ms. Schweitzer had little intention of being transported to the hospital. Firefighter-paramedic Apodaca would not take no for an answer, however, and Ms. Schweitzer was en route to Good Samaritan Hospital at 10:10 hours. The choice of hospital was no accident. Ms. Schweitzer's symptoms were indicative of a heart attack, and Good Sam has a state-of-the-art cardiac catheterization lab. What I've described so far is fairly routine. A patient with chest pain, patient that does not want to go to the hospital, and paramedics that ensure that they do not leave a sick patient behind. Ms. Schweitzer was fortunate in that Good Sam's cardiac team was already assembled. They had just finished working on another patient and were ready for her. And Ms. Schweitzer was fortunate because the elevator doors opened almost on cue for her as she was whisked upstairs to the cath lab. And why am I mentioning such small, seemingly mundane details? because Miss Schweitzer's aorta tore open right on the operating table, and she went into cardiac arrest. Good Sam's cardiac surgery team quickly stopped the bleeding and was able to save her life. This morning, Miss Noelle Schweitzer is here to commend firefighter paramedics Sanders and Apodaca for their actions in convincing her to go to the hospital and get her to probably the only place she could have survived such a catastrophic event in the nick of time. At this time, I'd like to bring up Miss Noelle Schweitzer to say a few words.
Thank you all. You're seeing a dead person speak, so I know I'm talking to the converted, and I can't change your mind how wonderful a firefighter Apodaca is. I have 100 employees. I'm not a piece of cake. I'm fairly strong, and if I tell you no, you better believe me or there are consequences. I do remember saying, I'm fine, put me back. He didn't do it. Then I really don't remember a whole heck of a lot else. But firefighter Apodaca, the nearest hospital was California. I would have died at California. He understood my symptoms. Of course, I had no knowledge. And he decided it would be Good Sam. So it's very hard for a person who has a miracle, because if any of you don't know, a ruptured aorta is perhaps the major cause of death. Not only am I not dead, I'm not diminished. And I want to thank firefighter Apodaca, who had an angel on his shoulder. And I suspect he'd say his whole team from the 20th, along with anybody from the commissioners to the people in the fire department, were also on his back for being helpful. I am grateful for my life. Thank you.
Thank you.
Daniel, at this time, if you could come up here. And this is the first of two presentations, so we will just do this and then we will go into the second one. And I will read the commendation of the Certificate of Appreciation to you. Daniel L. Apodaca. In recognition and sincere gratitude of your heroic courage, diligent efforts, and expedient assistance, which contributed to saving the life of Miss Noelle Schweitzer on December 11th, 2014, and ultimately resulted in her recovery. The Los Angeles Fire Department commends you for your extraordinary life-saving efforts to a citizen of the city of Los Angeles, presented this first day of September 2015. I'll keep him up here for the sake of time. Fortune was involved in our second story as well. On June 16th, 2014, firefighter paramedic Apodaca set out for a day of bass fishing at Diamond Valley Lake near Hemet. He knew that windy conditions were expected, but he probably wouldn't have gone had he known how windy it would really get. Daniel arrived at about 6:30 a.m., and whitecaps were visible on the lake. As he fished, conditions continued to deteriorate until about 10:20 a.m., and the lake was shut down. All boaters were asked to return to shore. Firefighter paramedic Apodaca battled gale force winds and pounding waves as he slowly worked his way across the lake to the launch ramp. He navigated largely via GPS, stealing a peek every 5 to 10 seconds to look for hazards. During one of these sneak peeks, he saw the head of a man in the water and his arm extended and waving at him. What followed was a gut-wrenching rescue effort that was worthy of a dramatic Hollywood movie scene. There was a capsized rental boat, 2 men clinging to that boat, and the third man who had waved down firefighter paramedic Apodaca. Daniel's efforts to position the boat near the 3 men seemed endless. Every turn of the steering wheel was more than countered by wind gusts that were later confirmed at 90 miles an hour. Shifting of gears from forward to reverse to neutral almost always needed to be followed by more shifting, more steering, more positioning, Daniel finally was able to maneuver his boat to capture the first individual and pull him into the boat. Of the 2 remaining victims hanging on to the boat, one did not appear to be responsive. Firefighter paramedic Apodaca yelled at the other man to swim away from the boat, which he did. Repeat the endless steering and shifting until the second man was aboard Daniel's boat. For the third and final man, firefighter paramedic Apodaca had to steer his boat right up to the capsized rental boat. In so doing, he damaged the fiberglass bottom of his boat. But he was able to pull the third man on board. He was lethargic and probably hypothermic, but he was breathing. And as icing on the cake, Daniel was able to also retrieve a large waterlogged tackle bag, a backpack, and a pair of boots out of the water. 3 exhausted, cold, and wet men slowly warmed up in the back of Daniel's boat and later on the launch ramp. They were from San Diego, and they were extremely lucky that firefighter paramedic Daniel Apodaca decided that this extremely windy day was a good day to go fishing. A board of honorary awards thoroughly investigated this incident and determined an award commensurate with the actions of firefighter paramedic Apodaca. The board submitted a report in detail of its findings and recommendations to the fire chief, who concurred. For members who have demonstrated bravery at great personal risk to his or her own life, beyond a doubt, and clearly above the call of duty, whether on or off duty, as determined by a board of honorary awards and in concurrence with the fire chief, that member shall be awarded the highest honor, the Medal of Valor. Fire Chief?
Congratulations, Dan. I had the pleasure of going to 20s and letting Dan know that he was being awarded the Medal of Valor, and we had a good conversation there. I'd always heard he was an outstanding paramedic, and Ms. Schweitzer's story validates that you are, Dan. You're the kind of person I want to hang out with. You never know the circumstances you're going to face, and it's good to have a guy like you. You know, when you think about our job, it's not just an occupation or a job. It's a lifestyle. You're a firefighter paramedic 24/7, 365. And Dan, you stepped up that day on the lake and made a difference in the lives of 3 people that day, not counting all the patients you've touched throughout your career. So it is a great honor that the fire department recognizes you and the work that you do. And we are going to have a formal Medal of Valor luncheon in November, and we'll recognize you and some others at the same time. So I congratulate you, I honor you, I respect you. I think he is an example of what is good about our people in the fire department, and I wish you the best. Congratulations, Dan.
Thank you.
Hello, Fire Commissioners.
Morning.
Daniel Apodaca. I'm going into my 15th year here in the LAFD, and I was a product of then Chief Bamatri's emergency appointment paramedic program. So I like to keep that on the top of the list. It's a success. I have enjoyed working under the command of some very good skippers, and I have a lot of respect for them. And I always try to uphold the best that we can do just to keep the Los Angeles Fire Department on the up front of all other fire departments in the nation. I've like to set an example to the crews and just work ethic and continue to treat patients as if they were family members. And I think that just carries on wherever we go, on and off duty. Thank you for this recognition.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
They got bought out. Sancio got bought out for Physio, so we're just changing the name. Yes, 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 yes. Okay. I just wanted to provide out of state. Okay. Okay.
Pretty much, yeah. You can take over. You find that takes up a couple of minutes. I forgot to ask him if he caught any fish. I've seen him a few times.
Actually, I have fire.
That's an LAC.
Heart surgery, cancer surgery.
What station is he at? I've never seen him before. Probably because he's always on the end.
They rotate there. Well, it's a light force.
Oh, okay. Okay. So. Okay. So moving on to the consent agenda item.
All right, I'd like to move the recommendations for items 4A through 4D.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So first item on the regular agenda item is going to be 4E, which is a report on the assignment of the agreement from Scan Health Inc., DBA Sancio to Physio Control Inc.
Good morning. June Gibson with the Administrative Services Bureau. This item is merely to reflect a change in ownership from Sancio to Physio Control. In a conversation that I had with Commissioner Woods Gray, she had a concern about the broader policy issue of the City of Los Angeles contracting with out-of-state firms. If I could just make a general comment with regard to your concern. We have to abide by the city charter with respect to competitive bidding with contracts, and there is not a provision that enables the city to contract or give preference to firms within the City of Los Angeles. I believe that there is a provision within the charter that allows for some degree of preference with respect to contractors within the state of California or with LA County, but not with the city of Los Angeles. In this particular situation, we have a long-term contract with Sancio. There is a provision within the contract that if there is a change in ownership, that we would be obligated to accept that as a condition of continuing contracting with the firm. Certainly, we've been very happy with Sancio, and we want to be able to continue that relationship with them.
Okay. And I understand from June that we've had this contract for quite a while. My concern was that I noticed that it's located outside of the state, and many people approach me from time to time asking me, why do they get a bill from Chicago? Why did they get a statement from some other state in the country when we're in Los Angeles? And so I have been trying to pay attention to. I assured them that that was not a contract that we voted on here in our time. But I am concerned that we look at California and try to help people in California and Los Angeles area if they have the services that we need. That was my thing. I really want to make sure that we look at, and maybe the city council needs to look at, implementing an ordinance of some kind, a policy, saying that we need to look first at the people of Los Angeles, especially now that we have a lot of high-tech businesses. And this particular issue is technology moving into our area. Perhaps we have people who could provide this service, and we have a high unemployment area in our area and in the state. And I think as a tax-paying funded organization, we should look to reinvest our tax funds in the city and the state. That was my only concern.
I think that's a valid concern, but I also think that you're correct in stating that that would have to come from probably the city council or the mayor's office, since we don't make rules regarding contracts for the entire city. And also, I think this is just an assignment of an existing contract. Okay. So somebody took over ownership of a company whom we've had like a long-standing contract with, and so we have to agree that the contract is not going to be binding on the new owners. That's basically what this is. So it's not, when I looked at this, it wasn't controversial at all. We kind of don't have any discretion about whether we enter into this contract or not.
I happened to look at it late last night, so I had to ask my questions today.
Thanks.
Between Saturday and Sunday, there was no time to look at it. And also, if I could then, since most of these issues come up, they're under the consent calendar, we've already talked about them. If I could have an anecdotal note from the department on which meetings we heard the issue at, then that would help me to know that I heard it and that I can move forward. Thank you, June. I appreciate your support.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question about that? Maybe to the city attorney. Are we able as a commission to make a request of city council to add to consider a potential ordinance? Okay.
It would just be a request.
Right, request, yeah.
Yeah, but if it's board action, we should probably take a vote, right? So is that something you want to agendize?
Yeah, I would like to. I think
Yeah,
Commissioner
we can
Woods
agendize
Gray
it for a future meeting.
brings up an excellent point in terms of giving preference to California or Los Angeles-based
should have
business.
options.
We've done that before in other areas, like the fleet that we have. We actually made a change in the way in which city council goes out for bid for all the vehicles in LA to make sure that they were purchased, if possible, from an LA vendor, which did occur, which meant a big deal to the LA base in terms of the tax base, et cetera.
So we could agendize that for a future meeting, that the board send a letter to
Council.
Yeah, make that request from council.
Oh, that's good.
Okay. So moving on.
Move to adopt the recommendation for item 4E.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
5A is the report by the department on the status and disposition of LAFD matters. Considered and referred to other councils, other committees, and departments.
Good morning, Madam President, Commissioners, Chief, Julie, and Sandy. I'm Graham Everett. I'm the Chief of Staff. With your report on council and committee activities from August 8th through the 21st, it's in your packet. There was about 3 pages that all went through various committees and council. In addition to that, there's 3 items that came in after the 24th. Budget and Finance received and filed our report on the 17 electric vehicles for the Fire Prevention Bureau. And also, Fire Prevention collaborated with Building and Safety, DWP, and gave a presentation to the Plum Committee, which was very well received on their recent work as a collaboration group together. In addition to that, on August 28th at City Council, there was 2 items regarding unmanned aircraft systems, the drones, and both those items went through. Our interaction with that is just to support the legislation that's before the city, and City Council is working on, the city attorney is working on legislation that would adopt ordinances within the city for drone usage. And that's my report.
Can I ask a question? Sure. Has there been any communication with Assemblymember Gatto on that particular bill that he's doing? Because I know we don't want to shoot drones out of the air, but so.
Yes, ma'am. About 10 days ago, so we participated in a press conference with federal and state and also city leaders, and he was there. And City Council has adopted a support for his legislation as it works its way through.
Oh.
Yeah, sir.
On the ambulance augmentation program, just seeing that reminded me. We haven't heard about that. We haven't heard about that program in a while. Maybe we could just add that. Come back another time.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
Yes. And many of these items that were on the report through were
They're
sitting
just
at
old reports.
Yes,
right?
ma'am. And some of them were from previous budget years that just were never finalized at Public Safety. So they kind of cleared the decks last week.
That's
So
fine.
That ambulance augmentation was from what year?
I believe it was from last year. It was previous budget year.
Oh, is it over with?
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if that meant it was still
Okay.
happening or not. Okay, scratch it.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks. 5Bs. We need to receive and file this.
Move to receive and file item 5A.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So 5Bs, report by the department on the Fire Prevention Bureau's Operation Catch-Up.
Good morning, Madam President, Commissioners, Chief Terrazas, Julie, Sandy, John Vidovich, Deputy Chief Fire Marshal. The report in front of you is just an overview of a program we've called Operation Catch-Up. As everyone knows, when I took over as Fire Marshal, one of the first things I did was analyze the backlog. We identified as of February 20th of 2015, we had 10,013 inspections that were overdue for inspection, which means 1 year or more. I'm happy to report as of this morning, since that date, we've had a 55% improvement, and the backlog has now been reduced to 4,592 inspections that are over 1 year past due. The oldest date is still in the 2008 range, but we had some that had dated back into the late 90s that hadn't been inspected in almost 15 years. So with that, the level of oversight, accountability, and metrics we've put in place at looking at our data on a weekly basis, as well as the promotion of the 8 new inspectors to fill our vacancies, the contribution of variable staffing hours of overtime. We've been able to take a concentrated approach on solving this issue. We're on pace right now to complete the backlog by February of next year. So my goal is when I come to you in February that all inspections have been caught up. Do you have any questions?
That's great.
Nope, just a vote of confidence. I think you're moving in the right direction. Thanks.
Like you will have done 2 years' work in 1 year.
I know we had some concerns from, like, a letter from UFLAC about this, but I didn't get a public comment card about from them, right, on this item. But so it's just an issue of me to confer, and just wanted to put that on the record. But good job on getting a handle on the backlog.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Move to receive and file item 5B.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
5Cs, report by the department on the nurse practitioner response unit.
Commissioners. Mark Eckstein, Medical Director. It's my pleasure to present the Nurse Practitioner Response Unit Board Report. Brief summary, the Los Angeles City Council funded our Nurse Practitioner Response Unit, which was initial application through the Mayor's Innovation Fund back in April of this year. The Nurse Practitioner Response Unit, or NPRU, has two primary goals. One is to make scheduled visits with our so-called super users, who are our high-frequency users of our EMS system, do a comprehensive needs assessment vis-a-vis our nurse practitioner, partner with a paramedic, address their social, chronic medical, substance abuse, mental health issues, and refer them for definitive long-term care, assign them to a medical home, as it were. And while we help this vulnerable adult population, the expectation is that their rate of 911 utilization will decrease precipitously, thereby freeing up our resources to respond to emergency calls as we initially intended, rather than going on the same patients over and over again without mitigating their problems. The other goal of the Nurse Practitioner Response Unit is to respond to selected low acuity EMS calls with the goal of doing a rapid comprehensive assessment by the nurse practitioner and paramedic team, including point of care testing available with diagnostic equipment in the ambulance. And the goal is a treat and release and treat and refer as opposed to transporting these low acuity patients to an emergency department. The end result of this aspect of the program will result in the early release of our resources on scene so they can respond to high acuity calls. And it's also anticipated that by obviating the need to transport these low acuity patients to an emergency department, it will have a positive effect to begin to mitigate our so-called wall time, where ambulances are unable to transfer care at overcrowded emergency departments. So the program's been funded for 12 months. We anticipate a launch date at this time around October 1st. The NPRU will be housed at Fire Station 64 and Battalion 13. Battalion 13 was selected based upon the fact it's a socioeconomic area that's underserved, particularly medically underserved. There's been a paucity of medical facilities in that area for quite some time. We have many patients there with chronic medical problems. We also have a very high number of our so-called EMS super users. And also with the recent opening of the MLK outpatient clinic, we felt there would be a prime opportunity to address the needs of this underserved and vulnerable population in South LA, provide a feeder pool to get these individuals into medical homes and the specialty clinics at the MLK complex, and provide some much needed workload relief for our extremely busy members working in Battalion 13. We're very excited about this program. The unit will be run 4 days a week on a 10-hour day, so a 4-10 schedule. We have an expert nurse practitioner supervisor that we're in the process of hiring as an emergency appointment. We are optimistic that will happen this month. And we've also, through a selection process, selected a paramedic who volunteered for the 1-year detail, also an individual who has advanced education, currently pursuing his master's degree, and has a interest as a career pathway in this evolving field called mobile integrated healthcare. I'm very proud to be part of this program. LAFD is by far the largest EMS provider in the country that's embarking on this new concept in healthcare, and it's going to provide much needed definitive care to an underserved, vulnerable patient population, and also provide some much needed relief to very busy, very overworked LAFD members in South LA.
Excellent. Question. I heard this morning that UCLA is rolling out a program that's similar to this. Are we working with them on that?
No, ma'am. The program I believe you're referring to at UCLA, they are participating in a community practice paramedic program that's been authorized by the state. The basic premise of that program is an alternative transport program. So the paramedics still have to respond to the incident, and in lieu of transporting low acuity patients to an emergency department, they could transport a select group of these patients to a clinic or a doctor's office. The advantage of our nurse practitioner program, it goes several steps further, where we're not going to have to transport at all. We're going to provide definitive care on scene and then refer the patient And it's the transport piece that involves the largest time metric or time interval of an EMS response.
It'll be good to have two programs similar in the community. It's
Yes.
a great need.
Yeah, and I work closely with the individuals at UCLA, even though I'm a USC professor, but we've collaborated successfully before. Once the football season starts, I'm not sure, but we think our program goes several steps further in partnering a very highly trained autonomous practitioner, which is a nurse practitioner, with a very highly trained, qualified, motivated paramedic. We also have 4 alternate paramedics that we selected through the interview process, 2 of whom in particular have quite a kinship to the community, both of whom were born and raised in Battalion 13 and still have family members residing there. So I think the whole team we're putting together is going to be quite compelling, and I'm extremely optimistic that the metrics of this program will resonate to the fact that it will not only sustain itself but result in increased number of units. And we're also had a number of very positive discussions with different hospitals and managed care organizations in the hope of partnering to expand the program to open up additional nurse practitioner response units throughout the city, particularly in underserved areas.
Very good. Thank you.
First of all, I just want to thank you for your leadership, as well as the chief and the mayor's office, because this is by far the single most exciting program that we've been a part of since I've been on the commission, at least. Just as there's so many applications for this that it's just never ending. But one thing that comes to mind is we enter into sort of these large scale events that sometimes occur in LA. Is there a deployment, kind of matrix, if you will, as it relates to how this, unit will be deployed? Is it going to be solely for Battalion 13, or will there be occasions where we can use it in different, large scale events throughout the city?
First of all, thank you for your kind feedback. To answer your question, which is an excellent question, we're trying not to bite off more than we could chew. So clearly there are a number of applications that we could think where the NPRU would be extremely effective, particularly at large-scale planned gatherings, as large as unplanned gatherings, to be quite frank. We're trying to keep this fairly limited. Some of our, as we presented before, previously, some of our top so-called super users have called 911 over 200 times in a year. So to do a comprehensive needs assessment with these individuals would be very time intensive and labor intensive, and clearly that will pay off exponentially to help these patients and decrease call load exponentially. And then there's quite a few low acuity calls they could respond to all day long in that affected area of the city. The goal of this program really is a safety and efficacy study, show that we could safely have this team of an NP and a paramedic do a rapid focused assessment of a patient, provide definitive care, prescription, follow-up, and so forth, obviate the need for emergency department transport, scheduled units, visits with super users, and so forth. I'm concerned if we expand it too quickly, we'll dilute the effect. But I think you raise an excellent point. The NPRU, I think, will be an extremely valuable resource at a large-scale event. I think as we expand this resource, which I'm confident we will, that's clearly an application I'd like to see with the NPRU would be very successful, such as the marathon or any kind of large-scale planned event. So, but clearly it's the right model.
Or God forbid, if there's a catastrophe, is there a way of getting that unit to deploy within some sort of a crisis management matrix?
Yeah, certainly I'll work with the fire chief in terms of exigent circumstances, as it were, for an unplanned major incident. And the mentality of obviously of our workforce, in addition to the NP we're hiring, is such that they would respond and pull that unit out, whether we told them to or not, under a large-scale disaster, earthquake, and so forth. But clearly they'd be very effective. If you look at incidents like earthquakes, where a very large percentage of patients go to ERs for lacerations from broken glass, for example, that's something that the nurse practitioner response unit could easily handle. So there's a number of applications that we're very, very excited about. And as you alluded to, this is clearly cutting edge, and I think eventually can represent a paradigm shift, because our call load in EMS is really shifting to a public health model, and really it's taken the place of house calls and urgent care. So the idea of this is free up our firefighters and paramedics to respond to true emergencies, provide definitive care to our super users, and keep the low acuity patients out of the emergency department.
You'll be happy to know in the 94 earthquake, when I did step on glass and cut myself, I didn't go to an ER. I went ahead and dealt with it.
Hopefully either you cared for yourself properly or didn't get a significant wound infection. But yeah, it's been well documented. That's the overwhelming majority of ER visits in any earthquake is precisely that. That's why people say to keep a pair of shoes under your bed because you get out of bed after an earthquake and step on broken glass.
Now you tell me.
You should have asked sooner.
Thanks, Doc. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I want to reiterate what Commissioner Fazio said, because I do think that this is the most significant sort of paradigm shift since I've been on the commission, and it's a recognition that this department has been part of the public health system for a long time, and now we're actually, acting like it and implementing strategies that sort of that are a little bit more humane. We're always going to be a fire department. That's always going to be a part of what we do, but this is a big part of what we do as well. So I think I'm very excited about this. I have just a couple of small concerns before we get started on it, and one of them is that it's supposed to be both like reactive and proactive. So, you're scheduling visits with these super users, but you're also are you taking 911 calls? And I'm just wondering how that's going to work. I mean, I wish we had more resources so that we had one that was just taking the 911 calls and another resource that was actually like following up. Because right now it seems like that's going to be a very tough thing to do.
Excellent question, Madam Commissioner. To answer your question, because we were cognizant of that, and also we held some informational sessions with the members and leadership in the affected battalion, Battalion 13, and they raised that very concern of the availability of that unit. So what we decided to do was we didn't want our resources on members on scene requesting this unit and they're not available because they're not in service or they're already on a call or they're not, the call is not proximal enough given distance and traffic. So what we decided to do with our current standard operating guidelines with the NPRU is the NPRU will never be dispatched during this trial program. They will add themselves, buy into calls, as it were, based upon the nature of the call and the printout on the MDC. So if it's a basic life support sick call, injury, minor traffic accident, and so forth, and the paramedic knows the city very well, distances. So based on proximity and traffic, they'll add themselves to the incident through our dispatch center. They'll respond non-emergency. They'll do a quick assessment of the patient. If they feel the patient is likely a good candidate for their services and doesn't obviously need emergency department transport by an LAFD ambulance, they'll release our companies on scene. When they're not responding to low acuity calls, they'll do scheduled visits with super users and they'll contact these patients in advance. So the benefit of this plan is the NPRU will schedule their time. The field won't request this unit. They'll add themselves to incidents or have scheduled visits because, as you correctly pointed out, otherwise my concern would be our resources on scene would be requesting this unit all day long, and they'd either be at someone's home doing a comprehensive assessment for as a super user or be off duty 3 days a week, or they'd be at the south end, 64s, first in, and the request is in 46s at 5 o'clock, and traffic is prohibitive. So we don't want to minimize all that confusion and maximize their effectiveness. They will be basically autonomously determining their time. So if a super user is available, he can come to my apartment at 10 o'clock tomorrow, and we're going to have our members from 64s have agreed to kindly make the initial introduction because they have a great familiarity and rapport with a lot of these patients. They'll do that. In between those scheduled visits, they will buy into calls and respond appropriately. So they won't have that conflict or collisions, as it were, with resources requesting unit and it's not available or too far.
All right. Okay. So I'm really looking forward to seeing this get going. So talk to me about your what's the communication plan to explain this to our members in the field, and you could talk to me a little about how that's going or what you've got planned or what you've done.
Okay. So communication to the field, a couple of ways. So we've crafted a departmental bulletin, and I realize written communications are somewhat outdated and fairly ineffective, but that'll be coming out. We didn't want that to come out too far in advance from the implementation date. So probably once we know for sure that the NPRU will be implemented, we'll go ahead and place the departmental bulletin on the department portal, probably 2 weeks in advance. I've begun to have some informational Q&A sessions with members at Fire Station 64, as well as the leadership of the entire Battalion 13, working with Chief Palacios, battalion chiefs, fire station commanders, EMS captains. These sessions have been extremely helpful. Our members have been able to voice their concerns. They've raised some great points. As President Ibarra mentioned, the issue of too many requests simultaneously. I went ahead and changed our SOG as a result. And also a very valid point the members raised at one of the information sessions was the transportation component. Some of our, one of the captains was concerned that some of these patients call because of lack of transportation. So if the NPRU responds, releases one of our ambulances, obtains a clinic appointment at MLK Clinic within 2 days, the concern is that that patient may call 911 just to get transport to the clinic, which I think was an outstanding concern we hadn't thought of, quite frankly. So we are evaluating our options for the transportation piece through a taxi voucher, access. I've reached out to Dr. Anand Lewis from Department of Aging for folks over 65. I've done a cost analysis working with taxi companies or some Uber, Lyft, those types of things. So we're currently drilling down on our possible options so that when the NPRU, before they leave an individual's home, not only do they have a care plan, a discharge plan, they have a follow-up appointment, probably through MLK, a prescription or a sample of medications for the first dose, but they'll have a means of transport from their home to the clinic and back at no additional charge. So clearly that's a piece that was an excellent point raised by the field. Also, throughout this current month of September, with the expected implementation date in and around early October, I'll be having several more information sessions, Q&A sessions, with the members and leadership in Battalion 13, so they have a very good understanding of the roles, responsibilities, and limitations of the unit. Again, that it's 410. They're going to add themselves to the incident. They're not going to be requested by resources. They're not going to be added by the dispatch because it is very, very new. And again, the questions and feedback from the field is very enlightening. And there's clearly things that no one has thought of because this is all the proverbial uncharted territory. But the feedback from the field has been invaluable, and we want them to embrace this. There's, as Commissioner Woods Gray alluded to a minute ago, there are other programs around the country, whether it's community practice paramedic programs or NP programs. They're similar in that they're trying to tackle what's evolving to become a large proportion of our EMS service, which is low acuity patients or people calling over and over again the super users. So I'm confident that once the field has a better understanding, they'll embrace the unit. But whether we do an informational video on top of the departmental bulletin, there's no substitute for a face-to-face informational session for an hour. And I think I got a lot out of it, and I think the members who attended got a lot out of it. And we're going to hold several more between now and the implementation date.
That's great. Yeah, I completely agree. I think there's no substitute for the in-person. I hope you'll also go back in January, February, and do another round of in-persons with them to kind of get the how's it going? What's the get that in-person feedback. I think on something as I know we've talked about this before, but I think on something as different as this is, there's no substitute for that kind of over communication, and really not only on the front end but also in the middle, and to say, how's it going? What do you think? You'll probably continue to get really valuable feedback from the field on those sorts of things, and I think you're going to see. I agree with you. You're going to see conversions where people maybe they might be suspicious of the change at the beginning, but then might start to see, this can be a real value, and we need more of this sort of thing. But getting that continued feedback, I think, is really important. So I hope that'll be planned in January, February timeframe.
Yeah, we're going to be looking at the metrics, closely scrutinizing a number of metrics, as I mentioned in the last meeting. And there's going to be a lot of transparency, obviously, and we're very excited about that. And also, the Fire Chief got that Innovation Award. We're looking at some very innovative, high-tech aspects of this program. We're going to be incorporating a telemedicine component some of the non-transports through brand new medical devices, point-of-care blood testing. So there's really unlimited potential for this resource. But specifically to answer your question, we're going to have metrics that we're looking at very, very carefully. Those metrics will be not only shared with the commission and the elected leaders and command staff, but certainly the members in the field. And I agree, the feedback of the members, particularly in the affected battalion, Battalion 13, will be incredibly important. We also want to share successes. So if we're able to have a successful intervention with a super user in their area, and we track, and that individual virtually stops calling 911 over and over again, and that vulnerable adult has now gotten definitive care for their chronic issues, that's a real win-win. The patient is better served. Our members are freed up to respond to emergencies in a more timely manner in their district and stay out of the ER for low acuity patients.
Yeah, agreed. That all sounds right. Also wanted to talk about the proactive piece of this. What's your vision for how this unit, or the nurse practitioner specifically, might be a resource connector? I know that they may help the patient schedule an appointment at the clinic and give them a sample of medication. To what extent, though, do you see them actually connecting with county health, the Department of Aging, or a homeless services center, on a regular basis to say, look, we're seeing a pattern in this area. We have these 5 folks who call every day, sometimes twice, and how can they be a resource catalyst in that way, or just something that is starting to make us more external facing in terms of saying, look, we are seeing these things. Your nurse practitioner is going to bring a different lens to what they see, and they may realize, if we, the clinic's good, but what they really could use is also a visit from a social worker over here. How do you see that all working together?
Outstanding point. So a not insignificant part of this program for both the paramedic and the MPRU will be to meet with our stakeholders, and you mentioned several of them. So mental evaluation unit from LAPD, public health. We've already had a few meetings with Department of Health Services. We've met with their deputy director. We've met with their CMO and CEO of the new MLK complex, who were extremely supportive and quite enthusiastic about the program. We've met with leadership of Kaiser. We've met with leadership of Children's Hospital in terms of collaborations. And you're absolutely correct. The patients we're talking about have usually a myriad of complex issues that are not easily solved. And part of this process is our folks in the field don't have time to attend these types of meetings. So that's going to be an important part of this, is to be a face of these patients, as it were, in our department, meet with the stakeholders, Department of Aging, public health, outpatient clinics, county health, and so forth, law enforcement, because we can't solve these problems alone. On the plus side, though, one of the things I mentioned, I think, previous meetings discussing this issue, the majority of our super users in Battalion 13 are not homeless, because that the homeless, you have to get them housed first to deal with all these issues. So, and we have a very robust database on these patients. We know not just their demographics, but most of these patients, not surprisingly, have chronic medical conditions and so forth. So we're going to be partnering with many stakeholders, both internal and external. And that's also going to have not just the MPRU folks, but people in the new EMS Bureau working with them on a regular basis.
That's great. Yeah, all good stuff. Yeah, I think I just wanted to sort of name the part of the culture shift here, which is not only that it's a public health disposition, but it's also a departure. We're looking at a departure from being reactive, right? We're saying it's not just when the call comes in, the bell goes off, we go transport on to the next one. This is about us actually recognizing that if we are proactive and we do take the lead on this, we have the ability to actually start to control our own destiny here a little bit. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing how that starts to work out for us. And along those lines, I think it's, as we go into budgeting, to be thinking about how these problems are writ large across our department. And, a nurse practitioner is a microcosm of, or what this nurse practitioner will experience is a microcosm of what our entire department experiences. And that has to be resourced properly. And so, again, as we get into that budgeting, thinking about what that resourcing looks like in our developing EMS bureau, and it doesn't mean doing things the same way with the same kind of people. It means trying out new kinds of people and building out those structures. And I know that that's an ongoing conversation, but this is just the beginning of that. And so I'm looking forward to seeing how that goes. Just quickly on the UCLA, that's a UCLA Santa Monica or UCLA Reagan situation, the community practice?
It's under the UCLA Center for Pre-Hospital Care, and they're partnering with Santa Monica Fire Department. And it's basically it's fairly narrow in scope. And again, it's alternative transport,
Great.
not no transport.
Yeah, and look, I think these different sorts of things. There's no one thing, and there's one thing I think I've realized in 2 years of doing this and talking to folks about this, because one of the most common comments that I get is, well, nurse practitioner, like, that's not going to solve our problem, right? Well, my response is, well, you're right. This one thing isn't going to be the silver bullet. It's going to be a combination of 5 or 10 things that we start to do differently, and we start to flesh out those things, whether it's a nurse practitioner or rapid response, or an alternative transport to clinics situation, or education, or collaborating with insurance companies and following up. We've got to think about what all those things are comprehensively, and I hope that is something that we can think about how to comprehensively think about all those things at a future discussion, what that looks like. And that is something I hope to see coming out of our EMS bureau. I know I'm straying here, so I'll come back to this practitioner. I think it's great. I'm looking forward to seeing what they do.
Thank you. Just last comment. Again, this was a safety and efficacy study. It's 1 unit, 410 schedule for 1 year. So we have to be cognizant of that. It's it's a paradigm shift, but in terms of a game changer, no. But once we show how successful it can be, I think with that expansion, it'll have a greater and greater impact.
We got to start somewhere. So this is a start, and I think it's great.
So I also, just in closing, I think it's just one of many strategies, it sounds like, that we're going to be trying. I also think we have to experiment with different sort of resources and even with different personnel. Like perhaps we need more public health workers or social workers, and whether they come from our department or from a different, we borrow from mental health or from public health, the county department of public health. It seems like it's more efficient than using, right now we have a staffing shortage with firefighters, and they're really expensive and highly trained. It just doesn't really fit to have firefighter paramedics doing a lot of this stuff. We have to do it because nobody else is doing it. So I'm all for us doing it, but I think that we have to think strategically about what the personnel is going to look like. And if that means that we hire social workers and public health workers, let's do that. Let's at least talk about doing that.
Great. And Chief and I met with the Director of Health Services last week, and we're discussing this very thing. So we're considering all kinds of novel approaches. And I think you're right. It's going to be the totality is going to have an impact to have our folks respond to the incidents they're really trained to do.
I have just one
Go ahead.
question about the alternative transportation piece. The fire department will be organizing it, or the Department of Aging? Or how will that?
We're currently not doing an alternative transportation.
I know, but
piece.
you talked about
taxi vouchers?
taxis or
Taxi vouchers. My understanding from talking to DOA that only patients that are eligible are over age 65. We're currently evaluating, doing a cost analysis, looking at our options to provide vouchers for the other patients. So that's still work in progress on the logistics.
And they do have that program called City Ride, somehow that uses taxis. My concern is using non-union groups like Uber and Lyft, but that's somewhere down the line. I just wanted to know who is actually in charge of it.
We have not finalized that, ma'am. So we're still exploring our options. We just wanted to make sure we address the transportation piece to get patients from their residence to the clinic and back home.
Oh, okay. You'll
Without
be
using
reporting to
911.
us later on, further down the road before you get it organized totally, or before you roll it out, I should say. Okay.
I had a comment about the transportation element. One thing that somehow I think, falls to the background in this department is volunteerism. We have a CERT program. You go into any hospital, you're going to see volunteers probably greeting you probably helping in some way, shape, or form. And I know particularly in that battalion, since I worked in that battalion for 25 years, that we have a very, very healthy group of people that are always willing to volunteer their time. Maybe there is some way of tapping into that through our CERT program or some other mechanism in order to, help people get transported if that's really the task from A to B. Maybe we can use people that are within our structure of CERT or something. I know it's outside the parameters of what they do, but just to convey them from A to B without there being the cost associated. So just something to think about.
Thank you.
Madam President, I'd like to add my comments to this. Number one, I want to acknowledge the hard work and effort of Dr. Eckstein as well as Ms. Gibson. It's been a standing discussion topic in my Bureau Commanders meeting. Dr. Eckstein and I have been talking about this for several months. Shortly after being appointed, I had a meeting with Dr. Eckstein. I said, you need to be attending all our Bureau Commander meetings. I also want a standing meeting with you every 2 weeks. In the first meeting, I said, hey, I want to do this NPRU. I heard about it at a conference, and he was ready to go. He had this already researched. I think he was just waiting for the opportunity. So it's a tribute to your foresight to see where we needed to be. The timing wasn't right. Now the timing is very right. So I'm looking forward to that as well. There's a lot of interest. I wanted to be the first city in the state to do this, where I find out we're going to be number 2 behind Anaheim. But we're going to be by far the largest city doing this. This is one unit, but we anticipate we're going to have more down the road. And there's a lot of interest, not only internally from our members, but from the media, from the public, from the hospitals. So they're all watching this, and we're very confident it will be successful. Commissioner Glazier asked about our communication plan, and just yesterday I approved a communication plan created by our community liaison unit. It'll include things like the department bulletin. We do have a EMS captains meeting. It's coming up in late September. Portal message, social media. We'll have a press conference, press release. And yesterday we included this topic in our new, I shouldn't say new, but our returning LAFD in Action video series. That'll be ready about the same time that we roll this out. So there's a lot of things going on with the communication plan. And in terms of just innovation in general, we are actually creating the infrastructure as we speak. Included in our conversation has been dialogue about our new EMS Bureau. It's long overdue. Within the EMS side of the house, we've been doing our tiered dispatch system, NPRU, our fast response vehicle, our nurse educators. All those things are new and innovative and are going to help us raise our performance level in the side of EMS. So thank you, Dr. Eckstein. Thank you, Ms. Gibson. And thank you, everybody who's been involved with this project, especially the funding from the Mayor's Innovation Grant and Bob Stone. And the team there, once we submitted our application and met with the principals, it was an immediate support from them. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you very much.
President, I also would just like to commend Dr. Epstein because he has so much more energy when he gets to the mic, the most energy I've actually seen. I mean, you can see how excited he is, how passionate he is about this particular program.
He's a pretty passionate guy, I think.
Yes, you can tell, and I'm really excited for him because it's not just looking at the problem, but he's finding a solution to the problem. And I think we have also a lot more energy because we have the chief. Chief Terrazas has also made a big difference in the picture that we see here. But thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, move to receive and file item 5C.
Second.
Favor? Aye.
Aye.
So our last item is report on the FireCat feasibility analysis. Ms. Maggie Woodridge.
Good morning. Maggie Goodridge, CIO for Public Safety. So the report that is before you it actually contains most of the information that I reported on verbally the last time I appeared on this item. At that time, I was asked for a written report and a timeline so that you could sort of better understand the timing of the various projects that we've identified so far. So I won't hash through it again, but what I will do is just give you a status on the projects that we've started. And
it was very thorough.
Great,
so
thank you.
Good report.
Thank you. At this point, in terms of the projects, we've begun initiatives, a couple of the initiatives. One is looking at combining the police and fire 911 phone systems. So we've brought AT&T in who handles all of the local phone lines that come into both dispatch centers, to start that conversation and determine what it will take to make that happen. We've also engaged the state. The state of California actually provides the funding for most of the 911 phone system needs, so we've engaged them to have that discussion as well and determine what it will take to make that happen. So we've had a couple meetings with AT&T. We've gone back to the state for part of the discussion, and we're going to regroup again once we have a better detailed understanding of the costs that will be involved and what it will take to receive approvals from the state on those costs. The other thing I've done is asked AT&T to go back and rerun the numbers to determine just how many seconds they believe on average we would be able to shave off of that call transfer time. So they're running that data as well, and we'll have those numbers back to us soon. The other project that we've begun is an analysis for the RNC replacement. So this is the network that takes the data from the CAD system in the dispatch center and pushes that information to the mobile data computer, the MDC, in the vehicle. The current fire system, the RNC, is outdated, end-of-life system that has to be replaced. And so we've looked at a solution that has already been contracted by the county, and have brought them in to do a demo, to do some proof of concept work to ensure that the solution really will be sort of a plug and place of the existing equipment. And we're planning with them now and waiting for a proposal back from them with the cost involved and the timeline on that. The initial estimate was somewhere around 18 months for that project, but we're waiting for the cost proposal and detailed statement of work on that as well. For both of these efforts, I've brought in a consulting group from Gartner. At one of our previous commission meetings, Commissioner Glazier had suggested looking at bringing a third party in to take a look at sort of the overall process that we've been engaged in and do kind of a quality assurance check on that process. I've actually taken a little bit further and asked Gartner to not only kind of QA the process, but actually help us with some of the project management and actual implementation. They have a number of resources who have significant experience in public safety, and in particular in either selecting or deploying fire technology on a large scale. And so they've put a team together that are actually helping us through these analyses, documenting requirements, documenting the expected outcomes of each of these systems so that we can implement them in a very sort of measured way and really know what success means at the end of each of those implementations. The other place that I've asked Gartner to participate in is around the CAD itself. So, these other systems I've talked about and that are listed in the report are really sort of peripheral systems that all integrate into CAD. But in terms of the CAD itself, the initial discussion on whether or not the fire department can come onto the existing police department CAD really led to the answer that it's not recommended. The existing police department CAD is a previous version of the Motorola CAD. It's not the most recent, and it really just didn't make sense to try to move to that. The police department was holding on upgrading to the latest version until we sort of understood what the landscape was here and what the plan might be. Now that we have that answer, the police department will move forward with the upgrade to the latest version, and at the same time, we'll continue the analysis of the fire department's requirements for CAD functionality in general. So the team from Gartner is going to spend quite a bit of time, and actually has started already. This started about 2 weeks ago, spending time with all the staff and management at MFC and just understanding the requirements for fire dispatch. They're going to be documenting those at a high level at first and helping us put together a request for information that we'll put out there to the market and ask CAD vendors to respond to that RFI so that we can see what the market of fire CAD solutions looks like out there. The Gartner team has experience in actually implementing a number of large fire CAD solutions on the market from a number of vendors, so they know the market well. So they'll help us with that effort. They'll also help us then break those high-level requirements into very detailed requirements. and do an analysis of those requirements against the latest version of Motorola's CAD that the police department will be upgrading to. So those efforts will run in parallel. They'll look at the results and the responses to the RFI and understand the market in its entirety out there in terms of the fire CAD solutions. They'll also compare the fire department's requirements to the Motorola Premier One platform, the latest platform, and then they'll come back and sort of lead the discussion and help us make a decision on which way the fire department should go. And ultimately that recommendation will be made to the chief and up to the chief to decide, but it'll really be a matter of which solution will be the best fit in terms of meeting all of the needs of the fire department.
Thank you. First, I want to say I seeing this. This actually, I think my second commission meeting. This is actually what I was hoping to get almost 2 years ago, and you know there's a lot.
Here 2 years
I know. And I think there's been a. I just want to remark on the distance we've come from then to now. I think we are in a really we're on solid footing here, and I have a lot of confidence that we are moving in the right direction to get this done. What will kill us is if we do not invest the right resources in what we're doing. We have the folks in place right now. If we do not come into this budget session and we do not invest the amount of money required to do this, we will have an epic fail. And so I just want to make sure that we are coming into the season, coming to our budget season, and we are allocating the resources we need to allocate to continue the consultant work, to help us find the right programs that we need to find the right infrastructure, set up the projects correctly. There are plenty of examples of tech implementations in public safety that go horribly awry. The one that everyone likes to talk about is New York City. It's $1 billion, and 10 years later, and it still doesn't work right. That cannot be us. I also just want to put a finer point on this RNC replacement. Maggie, do you know where we get our replacement parts for RNC right now?
I've not seen it personally, but I've heard that some of them come from eBay.
From eBay, yes, that's right. So let's just be clear that when we say end of life, what we're talking about is they don't make spare parts for the system that is the backbone of our radio network. We are behind the curve, and I will say we're not the only one. We're competing with a bunch of other departments who still use RNC and are also buying parts off eBay. So when I talk about the need for investment here, we're talking about 30 years of deferred investment. We can't wait any longer. These are critical life safety systems that we're talking about here. They are as critical as anything that we have. I think the timelines here they're good. One question here is AVL. Where do you see AVL fitting into this picture? And that's our automated vehicle locating system, right?
Yes, and actually, I didn't list it in this report, but that is one of the projects that we've asked Gartner to focus on as well. So they'll be providing project management and quality assurance services in regard to AVL specifically. I believe I'll be on the agenda to address AVL specifically in October.
Okay.
And by then, we should have some initial results from the Gartner effort as well.
Great, and I know that AVL is it's deeply integrated in a lot of the other stuff that we're doing. I know there's some forward momentum we can have on that, but ultimately it's going to be the final adoption is really going to be wrapped up with a lot of this other stuff that's here. So I'm excited to be moving forward on all of these things. I look forward to seeing what we're able to accomplish and how we're able to move it forward, and really just want to make sure that just urge the appropriate level of investment is made moving forward to not only stay on the time frame that we need to stay on, but also to make sure that we aren't cutting corners and we are adopting the technology that's going to work for us and work the first time.
And
Thanks.
we did have a conversation actually this morning about the budget needs, and we will be putting a package together that really tries to not only support all of this, but boost the fire department's technology needs in general.
I look forward to seeing it. Thanks. Thank you for all your work on this.
Thank you.
think that's it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, move to receive and file item 5D.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And we don't have any public comments, so we can adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
All in favor? A
Aye.
second. All in
Second.
favor?
Second,
Aye.
aye.